Russian President Vladimir Putin, in a call with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump, has agreed to halt attacks against Ukrainian energy targets,
but refused the full 30-day ceasefire that Washington has proposed and Kyiv has already accepted. Despite this, Trump hailed the call as good and productive, insisting he has an understanding with Putin to quickly work towards a complete ceasefire and a wider settlement to the three-year-old war.
After last week's talks in Jeddah, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had said that the ball was in Russia's court as the Ukrainians accepted Washington's proposal for a full ceasefire. But the White House's statement following the Trump-Putin call made no reference to that agreement with Kyiv. It just said broader truce talks would begin immediately.
Russia has made it clear that any deal on the full ceasefire was dependent on the fulfillment of long-standing demands, complete cessation of Western military and intelligence support to Ukraine.
Also, the assurance that Kyiv will not rearm or mobilize during any ceasefire.
Now, in response, a spokesperson for UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the country will stand with Kyiv for as long as it takes to ensure Moscow can never launch an illegal invasion again. France and Germany had a similar response. Speaking alongside French President Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said Ukraine can count on us and can count on Europe, quote unquote.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said Ukraine was favorable to a U.S. proposed ceasefire on strikes against energy infrastructure endorsed by Russia, but needed more details from Washington first. He said once they get the details, they will prepare their response and the team will be ready for technical conversations.
If President Trump can find time, he is a busy man. If he has time he can phone at any time, we are ready to pick up. We are ready to discuss the next steps with him.
The Ukrainian leader, however, claimed that Russia was not ready to end the war, adding that Putin's whole game was to weaken Kyiv. Zelensky claimed Russian strikes hit civilian infrastructure. In a post on social media, he said that a hospital in Sumy had been struck.
Also, explosions rang out and air raid sirens sounded over capital Kyiv, prompting authorities to issue an advisory. They urged residents of Kyiv to take cover in shelters, citing the threat of Russian aerial attacks. All right, for more on this, we are being joined live by Bishop Garrison from Virginia. He's a former senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense and a senior fellow at the National Security Institute and George Mason University Law School. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA.
Thank you for having me.
Now, to begin with, Mr. Garrison, of course, we know that there is going to be a deal when it comes to infrastructure and energy targets, and Russia has stopped short of a full ceasefire. That being said, what's your assessment of this partial ceasefire, if I could call it that, and what sort of negotiations can we expect when it comes to what they've said, technical negotiations on maritime as well?
Well, as the White House has stated, they see this as a beginning, a first step towards something that can hopefully lead to a lasting, long-standing peace. So a lot remains to be seen, just as you mentioned with President of Ukraine and his remarks regarding this particular plan. He needs to know more details, just like all of the other Western leaders that this is going to potentially affect, and to include EU and NATO member states. They want to know more about what this actually means. Right now, they're saying it is just a very limited ceasefire that relates back to energy infrastructure, as you mentioned. And only moments after the call ended, there were air raid sirens in Kyiv, indicating that they were worried about, again, another Russian attack. So a lot remains to be seen here. President Putin has not made any indications about any type of longevity with this plan, or if he's actually officially accepted it.
Mr. Garrison, as far as a statement coming out from Russia on this, one of the things that came out was that Russia has made it clear that there is an unconditional need to eliminate the root causes of the crisis. Do you feel that rules out NATO membership for Ukraine, and how does that perhaps have an impact on the EU peacekeepers being deployed to the borderlines as was being planned, at least in the European side?
I think that's a great question. I think it affects both things. Russia has also indicated that it has no intention and it is not going to remove troops from any of the 4 annexed regions or regions that it already has troops in that are a part of Ukraine. It does not want to see Ukraine as a part of NATO membership, because then you potentially have NATO members invoking Article 5 if they need to come in and help protect Ukraine. And European allies have already indicated that they are going to do everything they can to support Ukraine. And Russia does not want to see European peacekeepers in the region. So, again, a lot remains to be seen as to what this type of ceasefire actually means and what it could potentially lead to. To be clear, a ceasefire, a true ceasefire, is an important thing and can potentially save lives. And I really support the White House in trying to achieve that. But a lot remains to be seen in this type of deal.
Right, Mr. Garrison, that being said, of course, we've seen that Trump has labeled these talks good and productive. He'd also earlier said that they'll be discussing land and division of assets, just to expand on what Shivan just asked you. My question to you is, do you reckon that perhaps Trump overestimated how quickly he would be able to resolve this issue, and whether he had an understanding with Putin or not, and how that plays out going forward?
Well, I think the White House went into this hoping that they would be able to resolve it quickly through a variety of levers in their diplomatic disposal, so to speak. Whenever you speak of additional sanctions and pressure, is kind of a carrot versus a stick approach whenever it comes to Russia. But again, Vladimir Putin has been pushing for this invasion for some time, and now you have a part of the war economy in which the Russian domestic economy is reliant in some parts on this war. And we've seen more than a few articles come out about this recently, in which there are great concerns about their continuous shrink in GDP and whether or not they could potentially run into a long-standing recession if they were to cease this activity and actually end the overall war if a peace were to break out. So there are a lot of incentives right now for Russia and for Vladimir Putin to continue this. And the question is going to be, well, how do the United States and Europe, NATO, bring Putin truly to the table and get him to understand it's not his best interest to continue this?
That's definitely an important point that's come up from this discussion, and what Haim just asked you, that Trump had mentioned land and negotiations over assets, and that the talks haven't reached that far yet. So perhaps, there is more optimism than result at this point, but at least any step forward towards a ceasefire is a good decision at this point. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Bishop Garrison joining us from Virginia.
Thank you for having me.